Welcome everybody to episode 5 of the Monday Night Tours. I am Josh Kaiser and I am joined today by Kyle Hoagland. How you doing?
Hey, pretty good. Just can't wait to talk about this week's Raw. And Nitro really.
This was a wild week. This is, of course, we're reviewing the October 2nd, 1995 episodes of Raw and Nitro. The fifth time the two would sort of go head-to-head. I guess it's the fourth time they went head-to-head.
I guess it'd be the fourth time going head-to-head.
Right, but the fifth time since the war started. And let's just get right into it and start with, of course, Nitro like we like to do. We're live from the Mile High City. I think they told us they were in Denver, Colorado at least 100 times, which I think kind of goes back to what we talked about last week. If they're in a big city, they're going to let you know. If they're not, they're just going to ignore it and pretend like they are not going to tell you where they're at.
Yeah, they will waste their time with graphics if you're in like a Miami or a Denver, but if you're in bumfuck Virginia, they're not putting that. They don't. Really,
and you're not going to see. You. They also showed some like shots of the city and the skyline. And things like that.
Right.
You
did
see
they did that with Miami and they did that with Denver.
Right. I didn't see anything of Johnsonville, Tennessee. That's all I'm saying. I didn't see the rolling hills
Johnson
of
City.
Johnson City, whatever.
This guy's got brats on his mind.
I do. And speaking of eyes, Pepe was here to open up the show with the slinky eyeballed sunglasses or glasses, whatever you want to call them. Give it to Mongo. He gets a new costume for Pepe every week.
What percent of that is his idea?
I have to assume this is all Mongo's thing, right? Is it not?
Oh, no. Are we giving him that much credit for this eye-popping excitement?
Oh, I see what you did there.
Well, it's just that. I'm quoting Mongo.
Oh, did he say that? I hate Mongo so much. So Pepe's there, and then the commentary gets interrupted by Flair, who shows up, woos a bunch of times, calls out Arn Anderson, and is totally get Heenan to crack up. Heenan is just losing his mind.
Dude, he corpsed it hard.
Something about Heenan, Heenan just corpsing right there. Just tickled me. It made me really excited. I just was so happy.
When you hit Heenan with some laughter, you did something. You hit a nerve because Heenan's always in character. So like if you can get him to break for a moment, that's well done, Flair. It takes a certain level of insanity to do that to Heenan.
And believe it or not, Heenan cracks up again, though more in character later on, and we'll get to that. But let's just get into the show then. They open up with a recap of the Macho Man Lex Luger kind of feud, if you want to call it that, where 2 weeks ago the two of them got into the ring and were ready to throw down right there, but of course Gene Okerlund said, "Not today, gentlemen, not here," and really laid down the law.
Yeah, Commissioner Mean Gene.
That's right. And then of course it recapped last week where the Taskmaster had his match against Macho Man, which of course led to the Giant coming in and choke slamming pretty much half the roster. Which leads us into the match itself with the Lex Luger Macho Man match. And Kyle, you and I were both a little surprised that this seemed to be the big build-up for this show, and they're opening the show with it.
Not only was I kind of surprised with that, there was actually a part of me that was a little surprised that they recapped that much. I thought maybe they'd talk about it, and especially because it was the first match. I actually didn't think if it was going to be the main event where we were going to wait a while, then yes, maybe you marinate the show with like a build up to the match but because it was the first match, I thought they were just going to go right into it and say, this is what happened on, they kind of maybe say it on air what happened, but not have a package, you know what I mean? A total package, if you will. Nice.
I know what you're saying, but yeah, that's what they did. And they're billing this as a double main event. So, another main event like caliber match is happening. At this point, I don't think you really know what it is. I don't think they've announced it. You'll later find out it is a Arn Anderson match.
I think that was what Flair was saying. I think
that was a way of hinting to it. Yeah. But they did let you know now. It was interesting that they will spoil Raw. Of course, Raw is not live again. And instead of giving the results on the air like they've been doing, they're actually going to have you call the WCW hotline, pay money to get the spoiled Raw results. I don't know. This one's a little weird to me. If you're a wrestling fan, are you really going to call a hotline to find out the spoiled results from the other show instead of just flipping over?
Well, I mean, once again, this is pre, internet in a sense. So I mean, this might have been your only chance to be able to. The whole point of it was put this on speakerphone. You can talk to whoever the hell is going to talk to you. You always call and you think it's like going to be like Diamond Dallas Page or Mean Gene or something to talking to you, but it never is. It's always just some jabroni. And but the whole point of it is you don't need to change the channel. You just stay on the show and they'll tell you what happens on Raw, and then you can just continue keeping the ratings up with Nitro.
Yeah,
so actually, it was a good idea.
The idea is there. I just don't see if I want to know what happens on Raw, I'm not going to pay money. I guess that's just me. I would just flip over and see what happens. But I thought their method of just spoiling it on air is a better thing, but they're trying to profit from it, so kudos to that. Mongo does make a Raw reference where he says something about tossing raw eggs around. So yet again, there they are. And I just I want to point out one more thing before we break down this match. Heenan says Luger just wants RESPECT. Just keep that in the back of your mind because it does come up later. That said, Kyle, what did you think about this Luger Macho Man match that we've been kind of building up with for a few weeks now? Almost really since almost Luger's debut.
I should probably give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they just didn't really have a whole lot that they wanted to do from a technical perspective. And I know both of these guys aren't very technically sound wrestlers.
I mean, I would argue that Macho Man is.
I don't know. Macho Man's always kind of like I know who I see in him? Like, I see Dean Ambrose in him. Like, high octane offense, like kind of chaotic in nature. But it's fun to watch. He's more of the spectacle than his wrestling.
I guess to me, I still think Macho Man is a far and above more talented wrestler, and to just kind of toss him in the...
Once again, I'm also looking at this as Macho Man 95. I'm not talking about Macho Man WrestleMania 3 Dragon Steamboat Macho Man.
I still think you're discrediting Macho a little bit there.
And
but
once again, you also got to look at who he's wrestling. If he's wrestling Bret Hart in a match, sure, I think he can do it. He can do just fine. But he's fighting Luger, who's basically just a big muscular man.
Right. I agree with you there. But when you said they were both just not technical, I think that's a disservice to Macho Man.
I'll say this. I don't think Macho Man is going to care. I don't think Macho Man is going to make a match better with Luger because it's Macho Man. Not like someone like a Bret Hart or a Shawn Michaels could probably do. But anyways, as far as the match is actually concerned, I was still a little bit underwhelmed with it to the extent that I think that both of them are good enough wrestlers to do a better match than what they gave. And it started with the longest lockup I've ever seen.
Oh my God, it was insane.
Life. It was. I timed it. I think it was something like a minute 40 or something like that. And they went to commercial, I believe, while they were still locked up.
Yes, they came back from commercial and they're still locked up.
Yeah. So, and also, did you notice too that when they went to commercial, they usually on a live televised, something a show. When you come back to the show, you're coming back to the live show. But they come back, and it's a Halloween Havoc advertisement.
Yes, I have the same thing in my notes. I said, Halloween Havoc, the Machine vs. Machine commercial, right in the middle of the match. Like, what the hell was that about?
Yeah, that just seemed like why would you do that if you can't rewind, you can't go back, like if it's pre-produced. So you're missing a double main event with an advertisement because, once again, the Hogan effect. You got to get Hogan on the TV as much as you can.
And that'll come into play here again shortly. But
right. So finally, after all this is going on, I think, Macho Man's putting a couple punches, but it's still a pretty slow match. But once again, I feel like with those two, I'm sure Macho Man probably may have wanted to do more, but in the end, I think Luger, even back then, he always had kind of an ego about him. I think he always wanted to make sure that he knew what to do. I think, like I said, I think Macho Man could push the envelope a little bit more and, maybe put things to another level. I don't think Luger ever had that. I don't think Luger ever had that in him. So Then after that, after we're complaining about this lockup forever, then they go to an almost equal backslide lockup struggle forever about trying to
so
get
many
someone to get on the
lockups
backslide.
in this match. Somebody
And that's what
tests their
that's the
strengths
thing.
and
Like,
stuff.
and that's
slow.
the thing too. Like, did we ever really think of Macho Man as like, oh, look how I understand Luger. Luger is a muscular man, and I'm not discrediting Macho Man. He's a strong man, and he's a professional wrestler. Of course, he's cut like one, but he's not the kind of person that
it's not his type of match by any means.
No, it's not. He's not the type of guy that I would say. He's a professional wrestler that's a strong guy. It's not like Ultimate Warrior versus Macho Man in versus Hogan in a lockup,
sure,
or even
right.
Hogan and Luger in a lockup. That I can understand. This didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it just really slowed down the pace of the match.
I agree. Yep.
Which I feel like Macho Man, even at that age, still could keep a match kind of like decently paced. Whereas Luger, I think, has always been like that person that does a lot of, high power moves, but slow, like, gorilla press slams or, throwing somebody in the ring or into the corner and doing a flex. Like, he's never been a fast person. He's always paced himself in matches. But overall, it was a very uneventful match. I was really hoping that maybe, if the match is not going to be great, let's hope that the storytelling's good. And then as soon as I thought that, the ref gets knocked out, I'm like, okay, here we go. Something's got to happen.
And a very sloppy way of getting knocked out too.
Well, I mean, I never think that refs are going to choreograph these things well. It's just brush the wrestler towards the ref, and the ref's out for a while. It's
right.
One of the easiest things to do in the art of wrestling is to kind of get yourself thrown into a ref, and the ref can just fall down. So ultimately, though, Macho Man slams down Luger, gets the Macho Man elbow drop. But obviously he tries to do the pin. The ref is out, can't make the count, and lo and behold, here comes the Giant. And Giant comes in, choke slams Savage, and leaves. Doesn't touch Luger. He just choke slams the Giant. Luger puts him up on the torture rack. Miraculously, the ref is awake at this point, and Savage can't respond to the count of three, and Luger ultimately wins. For me, this could have been a better match than it was billed for. I give it a 2.25 star match, but I think that's at best. No one really messed up their spots. I think they did everything they wanted to do with the match. And the storyline does continue a bit with, we still don't know what's going on with Luger. We still don't know, like, what's Taskmaster's issue with Macho Man, and he keeps sending the Giant to do his dirty work. But that's an issue I kind of have with the storyline, is that this kind of – I understand they had the match, but I thought that was more of a Hogan and Dungeon of Doom issue more than it was, like, all those guys. And so I'm still kind of unclear exactly what this storyline is. Like, okay, is Luger's cahoots with the Dungeon? And if not, why is Sullivan targeting Savage and sending his cronies out? At some point, there's got to be a payoff. And I at this point, and maybe it's because we started at Nitro episode 1, and maybe there was stuff that happened beforehand that comes up to this. Maybe there's been some headhunting going on with, like, the main roster, like your Sting, your Savage, and your Hogan, that I'm not aware of. But because of that, I can't really get invested in the storyline right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just keep my rating short. I get a 2-star match. Pretty much, I agree. The match could have been a hell of a lot better, even, with Luger in there. The only thing I can add to you, like you said, is Luger in cahoots. That storyline's intriguing, so they're giving you something there. The only thing I can think is maybe Taskmaster has a thing against people bench pressing on his public beach. So that might be a reason that he and Macho Man aren't seeing eye to eye. But other than that,
it's quite the quirk to have.
hey, he's the Taskmaster. I
don't think anybody could ask the Taskmaster, hey, before I do this, do you have a problem with this?
Yeah, no, but I agree. It could be just the victim of us starting when we did and not seeing what happened prior to. Otherwise, hopefully there's some more clarity on why he's targeting not just Hogan, but also Macho Man. But we'll see. That said, we'll move on. We got a WCW Saturday Night promo. Arn Anderson and Pillman, who've been kind of a tag team now, are going against Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck.
That's Dirty Dick Slater.
Yes, my apologies. Johnny B. Bad, they missed his title shot, so not sure what happened there. He jobs to Mr. Wonderful and then doesn't make it for his U.S. title shot that he earned on at Fall Brawl. So interesting to see if they ever touch any more on that. And then Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Big Bubba wrestling. So
Big Bubba has basically been the Saturday night main event.
He sure has
for a lot of this. So, I mean, so good for him, man. He's staying up on the top of the card.
That's true. After this, we got an Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko match. It opens up with Disco Inferno coming out, and why not? His music plays, he starts dancing. Of course, he's trying to get some heat, get the crowd booed, get some airtime, I guess. Eddie interrupts him, tells him to leave, threatens him, and he comes to the ring. Now, they mentioned that Eddie is new to the WCW roster. Now, Kyle, you pointed out that the music that Eddie comes out to is Juventude's music. Is that correct?
Or at the very least, when we were watching wrestling, for Nitro in '98,
okay,
that music was not Eddie Guerrero's music. Eddie had this bass,
the only thing I can say is with the network, and it's something that we're gonna see. You'll see is DDP comes out and Jericho and stuff. A lot of this music WCW had licensing for that ran out, and the network plays other music over it. That's
a good call.
It's a possibility that this is they just threw some other music for Eddie here.
So you're saying that Eddie Guerrero's actual music is actually copyright and they can't use.
That could be. I don't know for certain here, but that could be the possibility because you'll notice you won't hear Smells Like Teen Spirit for DDP. Sure. You won't hear Even Flow for Raven. You actually hear Jericho's Y2J music when he comes out in WCW. So there's a lot of that going on. So it's a possibility that's what's happening here.
Okay, maybe I'll do a little bit of research and watch a 98 or 99 edition of Nitro and look at Eddie Guerrero and see if the music's the same.
Yeah. After that, we've got Dean Malenko comes out. For me, I noticed the Dean Malenko music. It sounds like the promo music they play for WCW Saturday Night.
It sounds like budget Goldberg music.
Yeah, I agree with you there. They recap what happened on Main Event. Which I believe was the night before. Eddie actually beats Psychosis for an opportunity to wrestle Dean Malenko on Nitro, and he does it with what Tony Schiavone calls the jackknife, which of course is the frog splash. Not sure who's confused there if they called his frog splash a jackknife back then, but I've always, not referred to that as the jackknife, so I don't know what more to say. And then before I get down to break down the match itself, I just got to say, they mentioned how Malenko is the man of 1,004 holds, and Mongo makes a comment that he knows 101 sex positions, which gets super awkward for everybody there. And Bischoff actually cuts Heenan off and says, don't even go there, which I think we all pretty much enjoyed because we can only imagine the ideas flowing through Heenan's mind at that moment.
Heenan had 101 things to say, and probably all of them were things you couldn't say on Nitro.
Absolutely,
unless you're Ric Flair, which apparently he's allowed to say the word ass.
Right. This match is what you'd expect from Dean and Eddie. It's fast paced. It's that cruiserweight kind of match. And just when you're getting into it, they interrupt it to let you know that Hogan is showing up as limo. So you got the two screens going on. Jimmy Hart starts talking to Hogan, telling him to leave because the Giant's on the prowl. And what happens? They go full screen, literally cut out of this match that you're watching to just go into this whole scene with Hogan, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier. They don't give a shit about the undercard people. It's all about the main roster.
Hell, they hardly gave a shit about the Savage Luger match. Right. They did the same thing to those guys.
So it's all about Hogan. He starts talking about now he needs to be here for the Hulksters. And eventually it does go back to the match. And there's a great top rope crossbody block to the outside that Eddie does. It actually looked painful to me, the way they kind of landed. Really, really good-looking move. At one point, the commentary makes a comment that the crowd is shocked by this match. Basically, the crowd was dead. Absolutely terrible. You could do better, Denver. This crowd was awful.
Well, once again, they weren't invested in two people
they're
that are really good, and one that in the
and they're new.
Yeah,
they are new.
10 years from now, 10 years from now, like one of these guys, or not less than 10 years from now, one of these guys will be a world champion.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. For me, eventually Eddie does win with a kind of a reverse, holds a cradle pin. They both shake hands afterwards, and Dean demands a rematch. For me, it's about 2.5 stars. I think it was a good match. Could have been better if we saw the entire match. And I know that these two can actually put on a better show. So not a bad match, but could have been better.
I think so. I think if you want to watch something that was a technical match, with once again like a lot of high flying, like they both provide both. I mean they kept on saying like both these guys know every counter to basically every hold, and I also said the same thing. 2.5-star match. I might would have said it better if we actually got to watch the whole thing instead of it being a bunch of being cut off. So yeah, 2.5 stars fine.
After this, though, we got a Mean Gene, his moment of the show where he's actually in the ring with Hogan. Again, they start talking about how they're in the Mile High City, the Rockies, the whole ordeal there. Hulk calls out the big stinky giant. He likes calling him stinky a few times. I got a comment.
That's classic. That's classic face heat.
Yes,
where, like,
it really is.
Can't curse. Yeah.
But that's the way he's ripping on his opponent. He's still wearing the neck brace, which I cannot stop laughing at every time I see it. And then Hogan does something that you and I both commented on, Kyle, that was very out of character. He gets out of the ring and starts running around like high-fiving the front row people.
Yeah.
Which seemed really strange. And even Gene says something like, I don't know if I'm going to get him back in here. And then next thing you know, somebody throws like powder in his face, and it's an elderly woman, which turns out to be the Taskmaster, of course. He starts attacking him with a cane. Next thing you know, Giant and the Zodiac show up, and Giant takes off the neck brace and snaps Hogan's neck again. So now we've seen Hogan die twice on television. But it doesn't. It gets better. They shave his mustache. This is the moment. Heenan was like in tears crying because they shave his mustache, and they talk about how it's further than inflicting harm. It's actually mental and emotional damage they're doing now. And the American Males and Nasty Boys come out, get some choke slams again to really push the Giant as a strong heel.
And also let them know that they're running short on time and they weren't going to have their match.
They weren't going to have their match, right, exactly. And then Zodiac, of course, channels his inner Brutus the Barber Beefcake, gets out some scissors. You think they're going to cut Hogan's hair. They never do, though. And eventually a trainer comes out here, which the trainer had a giant hole in the side of his shirt, and I could not stop staring at it. But for me, Heenan just crying, laughing at what was happening to Hogan because he hates Hogan so much was just classic here. Really just pushing this Giant Hogan segment. And I think you agree, Kyle, that this is probably the best story they've got going, and they're lighting a rocket to this thing and letting it go.
Yeah, like anytime that you take like the biggest face of and really almost not only did you snap his neck now for the second time, you're actually doing real bodily effect. Like you're shaving his mustache. You can't fake that. Like Hogan signed off and saying like, and the thing is, his mustache is kind of I wouldn't say it's a trademark thing of his, but that's a classic thing he has. And
absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, you don't just do that. And I said I loved it because I love it when the heels get a one-up, especially on someone like Hogan, when usually Hogan's a lot of times a very untouchable person. He's always, he says all the right things and like, hey, we'll see you in the ring, and then he ends up winning. Now it's just they're really making him look like a very vulnerable person.
Yep, absolutely. Of course, they follow us up with another Machine vs. Machine promo for Halloween Havoc. And then we get our double main event, the actual main event here of Arn Anderson versus Ric Flair. They're asking, where Luger is at one point during the match, and Mongo says eating a snow cone. So yet again, Mongo with the one-liner zingers on top of it. But Kyle, what did you think about this Anderson-Flair sort of rematch from Fall Brawl? I
forgot how actually good of a worker Arn Anderson was. Back then,
incredibly underrated, especially for people of our ages who really just never got to appreciate him during his wrestling era.
Right. When he was at his best, I mean, there was a reason why he was in the Four Horsemen. Like he was definitely good enough to be in a stable with Ric Flair. But it really, this was actually a very good paced match. Something I actually thought that I would have saw in a Luger Macho Man match a little bit more. But Flair and Arn were pretty much just throwing haymakers the entire time throughout the match. Nobody really had the upper hand most of the time during the match. All of them did their classic moves. Double A doing his spine buster, which I've always loved, and
phenomenal spine
Flair,
buster. Yeah.
And then Flair doing his usual, his closed fist punching in the face. Like it was all everything that I could have imagined this match could have been. And,
classic Arn and classic Flair for sure.
Exactly. I mean, they're both showmen. and they both did they both put a very good match. And then they started talking about the O.J. Simpson verdict. And I was just sitting like, really? This match? You want to talk about the O.J. Simpson verdict?
It was so strange, and then we'll get to Raw. So.
But yeah, that's true. But once again, we're also talking. This is 2017, and we're talking about a show from '95. I'm sure if we were watching this during '95, I'm sure we were more invested in talking about and hearing about what people thought
absolutely.
about O.J. Simpson.
I enjoy the. That's one thing I enjoy about watching this show that happened 22 years ago is all the topical, comments. To your point, the O.J. trial. We heard about Hurricane Maryland before. Things like that. I just appreciate.
Sure. The only bad thing about this match, and I'm a stickler on endings. I feel like the ending is what you remember. You can have a bunch of good spots and everything, but how the match concludes is what you remember. This match ended with Flair getting Arn in the figure 4 in the middle of the ring, and Pillman then comes out of nowhere, goes to the top rope, and jumps in and interferes. Now, before the ref even sees Pillman, he looks down at Arn Anderson. It looks like Arn is submitting. It looks like he's tapping out. He calls for the bell. And then Pillman, like 5 seconds later, hits Flair.
I could not figure out. I have Anderson tap, or was there a DQ there? I have no idea what was called.
I think the ref screwed up because the whole booth, all three members of the booth, I think had on their notes that this was a DQ. Or they weren't supposed to know the endings. That's it. Remember, we talked before that they didn't want, when Shivani went in there and Tenay and those guys, they didn't want to know the endings because they wanted an element of live and shock and surprise.
I know at some point it does go to that because Shivani has said it on his podcast. Right here, though, Bischoff, of course, is the booker, so he knows what's going on.
He knows what's going on.
Yeah, so I don't think it's that area
yet. Yeah, so now we're talking, ref calls for the bell. Pillman, apparently, this is supposed to be a DQ. That's all everyone else is talking about. And then now we know for sure that Arn is a heel. For a while, I thought that he was kind of tagging with a person who had heel tendencies, right. But Arn now is established himself as a heel.
Yeah, I think at the time of Fall Brawl, he was kind of a tweener, maybe even a face, but he is definitely full out heel at this point.
Yep. So they both beat the crap out of him and they leave. Overall on the stars, I say 2.25, and it could have been better if the ending wasn't as confusing as all fuck. Because it looked like a submission victory, but the commentators played it off like it was a DQ. And like we said, I think we just both assumed that the ref asked for the bell too early. And but I think we know that Bischoff knows the ending to the match. So, but at least the storyline continues. There was no clear winner because of the DQ, and maybe that's better for the storyline that Flair didn't win, fair and square against Arn. So this will continue to go on.
Yep, absolutely. For me, I gave it 2.5 stars. I thought the end was a little screwy, but I thought the match overall was solid enough. And maybe the best match of the night that we were able to see because we saw most of it compared to some of the others.
I think from a storytelling perspective too, like the one thing about Malenko and better paced, but there really was there was nothing to invest yourself into, and like you said, the crowd was dead to it. The crowd didn't care about the match because they weren't invested in either of the guys in the ring.
Right, absolutely. Did we get to the show closing? Pepe, of course, is gone. He gets his one moment of
he gets
spotlight.
His money.
Yeah, either at the beginning or the end. They do mention, though, to your point, Kyle, Flair and Arn Anderson, it's not over, and they're going to fight next week in a cage match in Chicago. Or Rosemont, depending on your thoughts.
I changed your notes to make sure you mentioned it was Rosemont.
And then, of course, we have the other good matches going on. Sting versus Shark. Sabu makes his return against Mr. JL. And Road Warrior Hawk versus Big Bubba. So Big Bubba coming back to Nitro. So after that big cage match announcement, the rest of the show seems flat as can be. Overall thoughts, though, Kyle, for me, I thought the show could have been better. I was pretty excited for it. A little disappointed with the Luger Macho Man match for the most part, but I thought the rest of the card could have been better. Hogan's story was good. I thought they developed that story well, but overall, just an okay Nitro. Could have been better in my opinion. What about you?
I think if the worst match was Luger and Savage, then you know that they were doing something right. Because you know that Luger and Savage are capable. And so if I'm not saying they phoned it in, but I just felt like, they didn't need to prove anything to the crowd. I think their presence, the fact that it's Luger and Savage, was enough for the crowd to get into it. When you've got enough storytelling, the match itself doesn't also need. That's what they thought too. Was that look? This isn't even really a grudge match. This probably won't even continue. I don't know how much further the Luger Savage thing is going to go. I think they were just doing this to try to figure out something to do with Luger because they kind of sniped him out of nowhere. So I think they're still trying to find Luger's place in the show. So I think at some point this will die down, and I think they just took their prolificness and had that carry the match.
Absolutely. And with that, let's move over because I really want to discuss what happened on Raw this week. So I'm really looking forward to discussing this Raw with you, Kyle, because it opens up, and here we are. You got a recap of the Smoking Guns winning the tag titles, which, of course, happened last week. And all I got to say is, watching that recap, I saw somebody had a sign that said Yokozuna smells like tuna, and that just cracked me up. So I don't know why. I just think it's funny.
Between you and me, do you think that the Pepe Slinky Eyes or me finding that sign, what would you rather have as the artwork?
I mean, the Pepe Eyes is fine, but that sign is pretty good too. After that, we get the WrestleMania 11 special recap. It showed that Lawrence Taylor beat Bam Bam Bigelow. Still have no idea what the special was. If they just showed a few matches, they redid the whole card. If it was a special, what the case was, but there you have it. Then after that, I think
when Vince had that relationship with Dick Ebersol back in the day, I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't just do the whole show.
Right. After that, we got a recap of the Dean interference to help 1-2-3 Kid beat Razor, which happened 2 weeks ago on Raw. We also got a recap of Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte. And then they discuss, somebody said, I think Lawler says that they just want RESPECT. So, for whatever reason, both shows calling that out. I don't know if that was intentional on Nitro's part or just coincidental that they both quoted that song.
It's a cool song to quote.
I guess. And then, of course, we get the recap of Razor Ramon and Dean Douglas from In Your House, which after about 17 recaps, we finally get our first match. And this is a strange one, Kyle. We've got 1-2-3 Kid versus Razor Ramon. You've been breaking down their matches before. Why don't you go ahead and give me your thoughts on their matches tonight?
Match was supposed to be kind of the... I guess now it was supposed to be this was the last time. Like, this was supposed to be the whatever. Something was going to come of this. Something was going to have to give, and it kind of happened that way, but kind of in a way I didn't really want it to. So they mentioned at the beginning of the match that 1-2-3 Kid was talking to $1 Million Man about something, like he was going to join his corporation, which would then make 1-2-3 Kid a heel. And I think maybe they just said that shit just to get like the listeners to like have those thoughts creeping in their mind, like, oh god, Kid's going to be a heel now or whatever, just to, I guess, create suspense where there wasn't any. But I have no idea when he talked to $1 Million Man. That must have been off TV, which maybe that's why they explained it. I don't remember anything from any recap about him talking to $1 Million Man. Dean, classic Dean, going out there taking notes again on the match, and then just leaves like he didn't need to be there. That was completely like, I mean, I feel like that storyline's over with. Like, I don't think Dean needs to be involved at all anymore in what they're doing. One thing I always missed about 1-2-3 Kid or Sean Waltman, X-Pac, whatever you want to call him, were those snap leg drops. He would go, he'd bounce off the ropes and do that real fast leg drop. I always loved those, and I'm glad that he was even doing them then. I didn't know when he started doing them, but I know he did them when he was X-Pac. So Razor actually wins the match with like a really hard clothesline, which made me feel a bit unsatisfied with the match. Like, that just seems like not a way to beat a resilient person that they always talk about 1-2-3 Kid being. And lo and behold, they restart the match, which the ref had no idea about and really was very confused about, but Vince apparently knew all about it. And they go with round 2. Then they go to break, and they come back, and that match is over. Razor actually won during the break. He catches 1-2-3 Kid with a power bomb, but then the match is still going on. So when you go back from the commercial, you think that it's still part 2, but actually they restarted the match for a third time. And the only thing I can think of is, okay, so now Razor has 2 wins now on Kid, so now it's 2-2. So now this must be like, all right, this has to be the tiebreaker. So Razor's dominating. He's basically just beating the crap out of 123 Kid. He's about to finish him off with the Razor's Edge, and instead he kind of shows mercy because I think he still sees him as a friend. He doesn't want to decimate him, and he kind of just puts him in a small package and beats him 1, 2, 3. And they both kind of look at each other. They share like a smile, like, "All right, that's enough. I get it. I get the message. You're better." And then they shake hands, and then Kid tries to like roll him up real quick like a schoolboy. And Razor kicks out, kind of looks at him weird, but then Razor gives him like this like really cheesy, like awkward, like smile, like, "Oh, this guy." And then they shake hands again. They walk to the back. They're best buds again. 2 stars. It could have been. Once again, the match was okay, but because of it was too chaotic. If I was told this was going to be a best out of 3, maybe I would have been like, all right, here's the second match. I get more into it, but I went from a high to a low, and I really didn't know where to stay in between. So the match was good. Like I said, I can't discount because it was, they're still going to have a good show. But I kind of expected more out of the Angle, besides the, like, I deserve more respect shtick. And then they were hitting some with DiBiase, and maybe the story isn't over. I have no idea what happens next couple weeks. But as far as I remember, I don't remember a Kid turning heel.
For me, this was just weird. The entire match, the fact that Razor would win, and then Kid would be like, "We're fighting again." So they're like, "Well, okay, I guess we'll fight again." The fact that one of the matches ended during the break and he kept going after it, it was very bizarre.
Doesn't the ref decide, like, dude, this match is over. Get the hell out of the ring.
So it's funny is a couple of my notes I wanted to point out. One, I had to mention when you talked about 123 Kid doing his snap leg drops. I have the same thing written down. I love that move. He does it so well. It looks so good.
And no one else does it.
Exactly. It's very unique to him. Exactly. But what I thought was funny was at the end of the match, when he goes to do the Razor's Edge, stops, he turns into a small package for the 3 count. They shake hands. They raise Razor's hand, and then Kid rolls up Razor. The match has already happened 3 times. Razor Ramon has won 3 times. He does this, raises his hand, rolls him up, and the ref goes down to count. Like, if I'm a referee, I'd be like, dude, the match ended 3 matches ago. Why am I still here counting?
Get the hell out of here!
It was so weird.
Isn't that also Ref White? Isn't that what's his name?
Jack White.
Jack White, yeah.
Yeah. So it was very, very bizarre overall. I gave it 2.5 stars just because it was different, but yeah, something.
So you gave it just as high of a rating as any match on Nitro so far.
Pretty much, yeah. It was because it was different. It was not something you saw every day, and it wasn't horrible, but it was just weird. I don't know. That said, after this we got an In Your House 4 promo. Basically, it's Lawler talking about Bulldog, Mabel, and Dean Douglas and how they're all going to win. So Lawler full heel at this point. And something you wanted to note, Kyle, was that they're not building up to the main event. They start with the main event match and work their way backwards, just like they did last week.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's kind of like when they said, "Oh, and finally, Waylon Mercy takes on." I don't remember who he was taking on, but you get my drift. Like maybe they just did it to be like, "Look, these guys are the important people. Let's put them up first."
Yeah, right. And then we've got coming up the Barry Horowitz versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley match. Before we get into that, though, there's some more recaps we got to go with. Of course, Barry Horowitz, who was Jobber Central for so long, recently had a run of wins against Skip Donna, including one at SummerSlam. So they show that. And then they recap Mabel and Bulldog double-teaming The Undertaker. And, of course, Diesel and HBK save the day there. I love that Barry Horowitz comes out to that Hava Nagila song.
Are they doing that because he's Jewish?
I think so.
Is that like the whole point of that?
That's my only guess.
He has music, period. I'm proud he has music.
That's fair. And then comes what might be the best fucking moment of either show in the history of us doing this. And that's the O.J. Simpson guilty or not phone poll. All of a sudden this pops up.
Everybody wants to give a shit about what the wrestling fans think.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, they've made a couple O.J. Simpson comments on both shows at this point. So I'm like, oh, it must be in the news. And then they bring this up.
Well, I think the verdict was going on
the verdict was going to be tomorrow, the Tuesday following. And so tonight on Raw, if you call this number and pay 50 cents per phone call vote, which is just a ripoff, you can vote whether you think he's guilty or not. The money does go to prevent the child abuse fundraiser, so at least they're raising money for charity and not their own profit. And they're going to release the results later tonight. If you're on the West Coast, though, you can't vote. My guess is because this show was taped, and they were having the East Coast vote from 8 to 9, and then they were just going to release where the West Coast wasn't going to see it for a couple of hours. But they make the comment that the West Coast is too close to the trial and the situation, so that's why you can't vote. I just thought this was hilarious. That said, the actual match of Horowitz versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley was better than I guess I expected it to be. A lot of takedown maneuvers. Hunter was doing his little knee drop move. I don't even know what you call that, but the thing he's been doing forever. So he still does that. Horowitz, though, my biggest takeaway from this, he's like a screamer. He was a screamer before Norman Smiley was a screamer. Really letting you know when he's in pain. But whatever you want to say, the crowd is way into Horowitz. Like, they're more pro Horowitz than they are anti Triple H at this point. So good for Barry. And of course, at one point they do a test of strength into the backslide, which seems to be classic 1995 wrestling at this point.
We saw it in Nitro,
right? You saw it with Macho and Luger, but here you're seeing it with two titans in Hunter and Barry. And then I gotta say, Barry Horowitz is the master of interesting pins. He did an abdominal stretch into a pin. He did a cradle into a pin. He did the Lou Thez press into a pin. Ultimately, though, they all became 2 counts and led to a Triple H pedigree for the win. For me, this match was okay. I actually don't know where I have my star rating. There we go. I put a 2 1/4 star in this match for what it was, but nothing special. What about you, Kyle?
This to me is a 2-star. Like I said, not invested in it. There's no real story. They didn't screw up on their spots. I think they did as good as they could do. I really don't think they really did anything that I didn't expect them to do. Also, just putting on top of that, we already know ahead of time what Triple H is going to end up being, so we know that he's got the ability. But I do like how that we have a jobber, who's always been a jobber, that is just over enough to get the crowd into a match. Because if you had Isaac Yankem DDS versus Scott Taylor, you know who's winning that. There's no discussion about it. This, with the fact that Barry has been getting kind of hot, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley's got kind of an undefeated streak going, but he's new enough that he could take a loss to Barry Horowitz. So it makes his upsets believable. So I like the match because I could have seen either side win, even though we know that Barry Horowitz is the clear jobber. So 2 stars.
It's credit to Barry Horowitz. Definitely one of the best enhancement guys of all time, I would think, and I don't think that's saying anything too crazy when it comes to that.
He is the Ric Flair of enhancement talent.
There you go. Coming up next, we have PG-13. Of course, this is JC Ice and Wolfie D versus Sonny Rogers and Al Brown. This is probably the first of the double main event that Raw had booked for the week, I'm sure. And Kyle, I got to be honest, I have never heard of JC Ice and Wolfie D in my life. I do not know PG-13. What did you think about this match and these characters?
I mean, it's a pretty classic. Honestly, it's a squash match. We knew that. I mean, I thought at first JC Ice and Wolfie D were the ones getting squashed before the match started. Before they announced their opponents, I thought they were the jobbers in the match. Yeah, but then you're like, and their opponents, and there's just 2 guys and just some leftover
creator wrestler outfits,
leotards for them to wear. Little fun fact: Sonny Rogers once fought Hulk Hogan in the early '80s in a handicap match, so he has had a match with the immortal Hulk Hogan. Al Brown, on the other hand, has not. He really didn't have much of a career. I think the only thing I could say bad about was that they did they tried doing a heart attack, like a Jim Neidhart, Bret Hart, the Hart Foundation finisher. They kind of botched it. But other than that, like, I actually really like them. I gave it a 2.25-star match rating for this, and sadly, I feel like if this gimmick was in '98, they would have done much more with these guys. I think they were way ahead of the curve, and it was just not time to have these type of people in the WWF. It was still kind of character driven, like as far as like larger than life personas, and these guys were basically white homies for the lack of other words. But if they were during the Attitude Era, I think that they would have actually been more showcased.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I kind of agree with you there. At the time, they weren't much of anything. They got the jorts, they've got bad hairdos, they got the 90 aesthetics on their...
They don't have huge muscles. They just look like two dudes.
Yeah, two kind of, like you said, like white wannabe rapper sort of look, which I think almost they were like too cool before too cool.
Absolutely.
Vince had no idea.
And sadly, they had more of a pedigree than them. They were like 8-time USWA champions. So
yeah, they did have the USWA titles. So they were somebody. They didn't. I don't know if this is going to be the first and only time we'll see them on Raw. I have a feeling it is. Vince didn't seem to get behind them. He didn't know who was who. He kept asking. They said they made a comment that the match took as long as the jury deliberations. So another OJ comment. For me, it's a 1-star match. Maybe I'm being harsh, but that's how I feel about it.
I would say that might be your rose-tinted glasses, because I think the match overall, I think the quality of the match actually really wasn't that. I think that the spots they did were actually kind of impressive, and once again, they were entertainment. They are actually very entertaining in the ring. So I actually kind of liked that.
That's fair. I'll give you that. There's actually one point I have when they do a move and they kind of point and laughed after they did a bulldog move, and it was actually very, very good showmanship. So maybe I'm a little hard on that. That said, after this, we've got an announcement that next week on Raw, we've got a 6-man tag match. HBK, Diesel, and Undertaker going up against Yoko, Owen, and the British Bulldog. And we follow this up, of course, with Doc Hendricks and his model of the week, Sandy, modeling the Bret Hart t-shirt, which, of course, it's limited. There's not many left. And if you buy it today, you get that shitty blank wrestling cassette tape again. So still a weird promo, but that's what they're trying to sell.
You would think they would at least. Do you think they would have at least given him an actual WWF Classic VHS to show? Instead of just being like, this was probably like a taped over wedding tape he got out of his apartment and just brought it with him.
And then after that, we've got Jean-Pierre Lafitte versus Bret Hart. So naturally, we open up with a recap of Bret Hart losing to British Bulldogs in SummerSlam 1992. What the hell was that about, right? I have no idea. I'm sitting here and I'm watching this replay and I'm like, okay, Bulldog beats Hart at SummerSlam. Wait, SummerSlam just happened. That wasn't that. When did this SummerSlam happen? I had to look it up and I'm like, this was 3 years ago and he's losing to British Bulldog. What does that have anything to do with Jean-Pierre Lafitte and Bret Hart's feud? I was utterly confused by that.
I bet you it was Lawler's doing. The guy hates Bret Hart.
Had to find the last time Bret Hart lost. I don't know what it was. That said, this was a fantastic match. You got Vince McMahon talking about what a maneuver, what a devastating maneuver, what a nice maneuver. He said maneuver at least 4 times during my tallies while I was watching it. I gotta say, Jean-Pierre got a little confident, too big for his britches. He took a lot of time before his pins in between, but he really dominated the match physically throughout. He did a top rope splash that he hit, used his size and strength, and it was one of those things that maybe you credit Bret Hart because Bret Hart can make any match good, but I really think Jean-Pierre looked good in this match too. It was just a classic. To me, it was a classic great wrestling match from the 90s, the way they controlled the tempo of the match. There was some rest holds, but not a ton. And it was the classic heel getting a lot of heat throughout the match, keeping the momentum in his favor for most of it. And eventually, of course, you do get the momentum turn. It leads to Bret Hart doing his classic Russian leg sweep, which led to the second rope drop elbow that he does. And eventually they do what I can't. Is it the white noise, Kyle, that he does where he puts him up like he's about to do a Samoan drop, but instead he like rolls forward onto it?
Oh no, I think it's just called a rolling fireman's carry.
Rolling fireman's carry. Yeah, but I thought somebody does that like frequently.
He does
wrestling.
do it, but no, white noise is like it's on the shoulder. It's almost just like a pile driver.
Yeah,
over the
you're right. You're right. Yeah. But they do that in there, which I thought was unique and not something you see all the time, especially for that era. So that sets up for him to do his cannonball move off the top, which Brett gets up and turns into a superplex and leads to a sharpshooter. Ultimately, this is a 3.5-star match for me. I probably could have been 4 stars even. I might be even, and I'm not exaggerating. This is hands down the best match that I think we have seen on Raw or Nitro during our 5 episodes of reviewing. Hart looked good. Jean-Pierre looked good. Lawler was the classic heel, still setting up a feud, I think, between him and Hart, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Enjoy the match all around. What did you think, Kyle?
If you're going to give somebody 15 minutes, because that's about how long this match was, you know that there's got to be a reason for it. This is a classic culmination of a feud. I don't think too much more happens between Hart and Jean-Pierre, so I think that's the reason why they did this. It was just kind of like to bury it. This is also one of those times where I really love Jerry, because it really, like, his assholeness in this, because his heel commentary during the match, it's something that is sorely missed in today's product, where you have, I last time I think I remember someone really doing it decently was when JBL was in commentary. And I'm not even saying I enjoy JBL as a commentator, but he did a pretty decent job of kind of being the asshole and kind of like, being on the side of the heel and everything like that. But at the same time, he kind of bounced back and forth to his liking. Jerry is a complete 100% heel commentator at this point, and especially with Bret Hart. And really,
absolutely, there's a feud going on with him and Hart.
Yeah, they were telling 2 stories. That's why I liked about it. Like, you had the story in the ring, and then you had, at this point, Lawler was not overstepping his boundaries. We've been talking about how sometimes Jerry needs to shut up. This was not one of those times.
No,
he
was
definitely contributed to the match.
Yep,
yes.
I agree completely. And to your point, what was your star rating on that before we
3.5 as well? I agree.
3.5. Okay. So after that,
the only reason why it's not a 4-star match is because it's not 2 4-star wrestlers in that ring.
That's fair.
If that was HBK and him in there, I could have said this could have easily been a 4-star. And one day we if we have more time with a podcast when we're not like kind of like strapped for time, I think it'd be good to kind of really talk about like how we give our ratings and how we kind of do our system.
Yeah, we could probably something for the future, anyways. After that, though, after the match, we do have King and Hart. They're jabbering at each other again, and then all of a sudden Lawler starts stripping, takes off his shirt, and him and Brett get into it. He starts getting beat by Brett. This, of course, leads to Isaac Yankem showing up, comes in for the save. He drops the ever-fearsome DDS, which, of course, is a DDT. And the crowd chants Diesel, because why the fuck not, right?
I think they just want him out there to just beat up on Isaac Yankem.
I guess,
I don't
but
know.
It's not a few. It's Diesel has nothing to do with any of these guys right now.
Once again, it's the fans who yell USA on a match or Daniel Bryan for no reason.
Or I fully expect him to start chanting CM Punk at this point.
Yeah, right.
But it's they further the storyline with them by saying Gorilla Monsoon has announced a cage match in a couple of weeks between Brett and Isaac Yankem. Now, to me, because this was a taped show and they made that announcement, I think WCW saw that, said, we're going to jump the gun, Arn and Flair in a cage next week on Nitro. They're going to do the cage match before Raw does. What do you think about that? You think that's what happened?
That's interesting because the moment somebody does a high stakes match, like a ladder match or something like that, you got to raise the stakes on your own show. So that is kind of it's very advantageous for them to know already what your competition is doing next week, because you can already kind of put the chips or the kind of like the game pieces in place in your favor already.
Yep, absolutely. So they jump them by a week at least, if not more. And then we come to this show just gets better and better as it goes on. You get they're promoting the 6-man tag match, which of course is going to be the main event for next week's Raw. And it opens up, you have Cornette discussing everything with his guys, and they each kind of talk for a minute, and then of course Yokozuna yells his Banzai moments,
like some fat sumo Pokemon.
Yes, that's a great analogy actually, because that's all he said. And then we get to the better part. Of course, the baby faces of Diesel, HBK, and Undertaker. They're going to do their segment, and it starts with standard, Shawn Michaels and Diesel promos that we've come to enjoy, where they talk about Taker doesn't need their help, but we're here. We're the two dudes with attitudes. It's very chill. It's Big Daddy Cool and his boy, the Heartbreak Kid. And then after all of that, it cuts to Undertaker, and he starts talking about rotting carcasses, and he really makes things weird. And it was just so yin and yang right here between the two promos for those guys. And for me, I just popped for that. I thought it was funny. What did you think about that?
I was waiting for it. Like, I would have been very, very disappointed if Diesel and HBK just kind of did a cheesy smile throughout the whole thing. But the fact that both of them gave like a what? Like, kind of looked on their faces. Sean's was the best. Because Sean was just doing a smile, chewing his gum, and then all of a sudden he was just kind of like, ugh. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
I think Diesel just kind of just looked over there like, is that what he just said?
It's like one of those things like, oh, dude, like what? Like this, you just made things really weird.
Dude, feel out the room before you start saying this shit.
Just loved. I thought it was awesome. What a great way to close the show, or so I thought. But they top it because they ultimately.
How many cherries do you want on this Sunday, right? How many cherries?
If this Raw couldn't get any better, it of course ends with the main event. The vote is in, the OJ trial. Who did the WWF Universe vote for? In a close 51% to 49% in favor of not guilty, voting OJ not guilty. Which kind of crazy when you think about it, Kyle. That
it almost seems not true at all. It almost seems like they had that graphic up for a while, and they just took the money and ran with it. Because once again, I don't know if they really wanted to get themselves involved. Where if, let's say 100% of WWF thought that he was guilty, I don't think they would put that graphic up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think this is a good way of putting it. And you know what? If this was true, then the WWF universe was just as in the know as the actual jury that acquitted him.
That's true. So that is Raw, and what a wild ride Raw was this week.
That's a tongue twister.
That was a tongue twister. For me, it was better than Nitro all around. While a little strange with what happened with the 3 or 4 match Razor Ramon 1 2 3 Kid 3 or 4 falls that they had. Of course, the OJ trial votes going on in there. The phenomenal match with Jean-Pierre Lafitte. The storytelling with Lawler and Hart. I mean, for me, it was all around. It was a great show. Much better than Nitro on my end. What did you think?
Oh yeah, Raw killed it. I will say though that I think as far as looking forward to next week, Nitro has I think so far done a good job with teasing the next show.
Agree with you there. Yes,
but
yes.
they I think the one thing that they're falling flat on is actually delivering what they're hyping at this point. They hyped Denver really well. You even said on the episode before
Nitro's
that
giving us
really
blue balls on a weekly basis.
Right.
And they're teasing it, they're getting us excited, and then they just let us down when it actually comes. I think that's the
right.
best way
So in that sense, the storytelling is still a little bit better. I feel like on Raw, they conclude the show and just say, "Hey, there's some matches coming up next week." Where like there's not a whole lot of storyline right now if you really think about it. If you really look at what's going on in WWF, it's not much.
Look at their card for the In Your House. To me, I'm much more looking forward to Halloween Havoc, and I only know one confirmed match at this point, and that's Hogan and Giant. Where In Your House, I know the entire card, and I don't give a shit. I'm not invested in any of those storylines at this point.
Right. I think you'll think that the matches will be good. They'll be good quality, but in the end right now, I'm more interested from a story perspective for Nitro, but at the same time, I think that when Raw's show is as good high quality as it is, I think you don't really need to worry about getting too lost in the story when the product is that good.
Yeah, I agree. So that said, that's both shows. When it comes to who won the battle, I think we both agree Raw won this week. As far as the Nielsen ratings went, they tied. Raw was at a 2.5, which is up from 1.9 last week. And Nitro was at a 2.5 as well, but they're down from the 2.7 last week. So pretty close. These numbers just kind of floating around. They're somewhere between 2 and 2.7 every week, but they're both kind of holding steady there. That said, next week, we'll be back. We're going to discuss, of course, that Arn Flair cage match that we're going to have. We'll have that 6-man tag in Raw, and whatever other crazy antics that takes place now that the OJ trial's over. We can only imagine.
We can all take a deep breath and enjoy some wrestling again.
There you go. And if you're enjoying the Monday Night Tours, give us a follow. Go to we're on iTunes. Subscribe to us there. If you're Google Play, find us on there. And go follow us on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, all of those, at Monday Night Tour or Monday Night Tours, depending on where you're at for that. And we also have MondayNightTours.com for our website where you can find all of those accounts as well. That said, we'll be back next time for Kyle Hoagland. I am Josh Kaiser. We will see you guys next time on the Monday Night Tours.
Have a good Tuesday. See you later.